Hello again everyone, and welcome to the video. Once again, I was walking back from the squadron, and once again I am slated to fly later tonight. But before I do, it is time to hit the gym and accomplish the next workout in the 5-day split that I've been covering in this series of videos. In the last video, I hit the chest and arms. I accomplished the bench press from a strength standpoint, and then I moved on to arms, biceps, and triceps from a hypertrophy or size development focus. And this time it is time to accomplish the back squat from a powerlifting standpoint, primarily focused on strength, and then I will move on to some isolation exercises for the legs to accomplish size development or hypertrophy, or at least that's the goal. Finally, I will finish up with the same neck series that I did in the last video, and also something for the abs. It's actually been a few days since the bench press and arm day. The way that I'm set up right now, that's actually the final day of the split. Since then, I've had a rest day and an active recovery day where I went in and did some running, a little bit of cardio, hopped on the bike for a little bit, just to stay active, but not in a way that should impact my recovery or that should sacrifice strength or muscle retention. It doesn't matter how you order the days, as long as you're giving your body adequate recovery time. So don't get hung up on that being day 1 and this being day 2, or that being the last day and this being the first day. It's just 5 days of a split that can be organized however best suits my needs at the time, and could be organized to however you need it to suit your time in the gym and your recovery and your performance. The only potential advantage to the way that I have it set up is that I currently alternate between powerlifting and high intensity interval training cardio throughout the week before the hypertrophy lifts, and that allows me to not be back to back with powerlifting days or high intensity interval training days, which seems to suit my recovery a little bit better. By the end of this series of videos, you should understand the full split that I have set up. On that note, I mentioned in the last video that I am on a short duration calorie deficit, a short duration cut, in order to tighten up a bit before resuming a bulking or gaining regimen. So I'm very focused right now on preserving my strength and also a good deal of energy, because I need that for the aircraft and the gym. A good bro of mine in the squadron, another Eagle driver, and I both decided at the start of this deployment to begin with a sort of mini cut for this entire month. And while I am feeling some of the downsides of that cut in the gym from time to time, they are relatively mild relative to other longer duration cuts that I've done. And we are done cutting in 3 days from now, so it will be over, so I can then resume bulking and eating more. I say most of that to highlight that the programming isn't any different than I'll do outside of the cut. I don't have any plans of changing it at all. I'm just recognizing that my progress will differ when I compare this performance within the cut to outside the cut once I'm getting more of a calorie surplus. Enough on that discussion. Let's get over to the gym and the voiceover. For the back squat this week, I am accomplishing 5 sets of 5 reps, or a 5x5. I do the same thing that I do with the bench press from the last video, where I alternate between a heavy set of 3 reps and 5 sets of 5 reps at a slightly diminished weight. Prior to executing the lift, I still accomplish a warm-up with a few exercises that I mentioned briefly in the last video, and then I will warm up with the squat itself using light weight and focusing on explosive power output. I want the weight to feel light throughout these initial movements to mentally prepare myself for the weight that I'm actually going to execute on the 5 sets of 5 reps. Technique-wise, I'm focused on leading with the hips and making sure that my knees are tracking out over my toes. I've got a link to 2 different articles from Squat University that talk about both of those facets of the squat and help dispel some of the myths associated with them, namely that somehow deep squats and allowing the knees to track over the toes might be bad for your knees, when in reality, both of those facets of the squat actually contribute to a stable platform for the posterior chain throughout the movement. I'm also focused on keeping my spine neutral. The eye position, or where you're looking, is not as critical. What's more critical is that the spine itself is neutral. You may have heard look up to go up, but in reality, the more you strain to lift your neck, the more at risk you are for putting the spine into hyperextension. Or conversely, if you look down at the ground, you might find your spine in flexion, and in either case, that's an error. So it's better to focus your gaze on whatever position helps keep your neck and spine neutral relative to your motion. Toward the end of the 5 sets, my knees tend to collapse inward and no longer track along the foot flare that I've established for myself. So I attempt in those cases to pause the squat in the middle, as you'll see me do toward the end of this segment of the video, force my knees back on track, and then finish the lift appropriately. I do use a weight belt and knee sleeves when I squat heavy. I used to be of a mindset that those tools might detract from a more natural development of the muscles that are involved in the squat, but now I maintain that it's mostly about variable control and injury prevention. Removing some of the concerns about knee and lower back variance while squatting lets me target the movement more confidently. I do want to touch on a few fighter pilot specific considerations for the squat. The prominence of the posterior chain in terms of G tolerance is undeniable. The glutes, hamstrings, quads all feature heavily in the performance of a proper anti-G straining maneuver, or AGSM. It's necessary to engage those muscles to help prevent pooling of blood in the legs that ultimately contributes to G-induced loss of consciousness, or G-lock. And the G-suits that we wear used to offer about a G or a G and a half of extra protection in that regard, and the newer ones afford even more, but their function is partially dependent on the pilot's capability to flex against the G-suit while performing the AGSM, further highlighting the importance of the posterior chain. There's also the seldom discussed mental connection in terms of G tolerance, that is to say the pure feeling of driving up with the posterior chain out of the bottom of a squat is not unlike the physiological commitment it takes to engage those muscles to keep conscious under G loading in the jet. So if nothing else, the squat is good mental preparation for a G strain. I don't, however, recommend squatting a weight that puts you at risk of loss of consciousness in the gym, mostly to avoid the embarrassment and shame that inevitably follows. I've got some links below to articles by a flight surgeon who goes by Apollo that talk more about these considerations, complete with centrifuge videos that give you an idea of the feeling of 9Gs. And I've also got videos of my own centrifuge rides that I'll probably wind up posting to the channel at some point, depending on what you guys want to see, so let me know in the comments. With a much shorter discussion, the first of the hypertrophy lifts for the day is the standing calf raise. I execute 3 sets of these in a reverse pyramid scheme like many of the other hypertrophy lifts that I do, with a major difference being that I attempt 12, 14, and 16 repetitions instead of the normal 8, 10, or 12 numbers. While the calves are actually comprised of a combination of fast twitch and slow twitch or intermediate twitch fibers, and much of the high reps only mentality surrounding calf training may be overblown, I still prefer a higher rep scheme for this lift. Keeping a slight bend in the knee still allows the more powerful calf muscle, the gastrocnemius, to perform a majority of the work while also being more stable for the knee itself than a full lockout, so I maintain the slight bend even as I focus on full calf range of motion. I then move on to a prone leg curl. For this exercise, I use my more common 8, 10, 12 rep reverse pyramid structure. And throughout the lift, I find that it's worth expending a bit of mental effort on isolating the hamstrings, since it can be easy to get into a sort of rocking or bouncing motion, which I try to avoid, especially as I get fatigued. Some people overestimate the degree to which other lower body exercises target the hamstrings, thinking, for instance, that squatting will sufficiently engage that muscle group. I've got a link, however, in the description to a study that's actually one among many, highlighting the fact that exercises like the squat are not as hamstring activating as exercises which specifically result in knee flexion, like the leg curl, which you might expect from looking at the lift. Knowing how important the posterior chain is overall to my G tolerance, that is just more data further supporting training the hamstrings specifically. And also from an aesthetic standpoint, I just want bigger hamstrings to contribute to a more muscular looking leg, so it makes sense to include this in the hypertrophy focused lifts from an isolated standpoint. Even though I've already accomplished the squat from a strength focused mindset in the day's power lift, I also have a squat type movement in the hypertrophy lifts to further develop those muscles in the form of this single leg dumbbell squat with a bench, also known as the Bulgarian split squat. I use a flat bench to stabilize the untargeted leg while I perform the lift, once again doing 3 sets of a reverse pyramid scheme that targets 8, 10, and 12 reps. I find that this lift adds in the benefit of a greater balance demand over some other leg exercises, contributing to overall coordination in that regard. Also, the Bulgarian split squat can be useful to some trainees who sense an imbalance in their traditional back squat, because the split squat obviously targets each leg independently, which also makes it better suited for ensuring symmetrical visual development of the muscles involved. Once I'm done with this lift, I move on to leg extensions. For the leg extensions, I use the same reverse pyramid series as other lifts. The lift itself is unlike the other quad-related lifts I've already done in that this one is almost completely quad isolating, as evidenced by the increased lactic acid burn that many trainees, myself included, feel with this lift, so it's more or less a go-to for quad-specific hypertrophy. Much like the leg curl, the lift can lend itself to some bouncing on the seat, which I attempt to avoid as I get more exhausted. I also put a good deal of effort in this lift to resisting the motion of the equipment on the way back down, which just ensures that I'm getting the most out of the lift. Finally, I'll accomplish 20 weighted lunges as a not quite burnout set at the end of the day. It's not visible in the shot, but I've got a 55-pound plate that I'm holding behind my shoulders, so it's lightweight for the complex movement. I say not quite burnout because the goal is not complete muscle failure, but rather a little more exhaustion, a good deal more blood flow, and some more volume to round out the day and sufficiently stress the legs. Just the one set of 20 is all I will do. Then I'll do the auxiliary work that I mentioned in the last video, and I'm done with the workout. All right, that was the workout and therefore the video. I did at the end do, like I mentioned beforehand, the neck series, the same one that I did in the last workout, and a little bit of ab work, but I didn't film it because I'd already shown that, and you can just chalk that up to being the same as last time. This whole workout series is different from what I do back at home station, and when I get back home to my family, I will show you guys, hopefully in another series of videos, how I trim down what I'm doing here to account for more time with my family, so I can spend more time at home and not all my time in the gym, but still pursue my goals in the gym and in the aircraft. I may do a video or two in between this one and the next workout video addressing a few different topics if that's something that you guys would like to see. So let me know. Leave a comment or a question or send an email or head over to the Facebook page. For now, it is time for me to go eat and then get a little bit of sleep before I go and fly. I really hope you enjoyed the video, and thanks so much for watching.